Maya Freeman hadn't let a man's skin touch hers in 10 years until the cowboy collapsed bleeding on her porch, and she reached out to drag him inside. Thunder cracked above the Montana territory like God breaking bones. October snow drove sideways across her ranch, each flake sharp as broken glass. Maya stood in her doorway, rifle raised, watching the stranger bleed into her weathered boards. He was face down, hat gone, dark hair matted with ice and something darker. His breathing came shallow and quick, the kind of breathing that meant a man was deciding whether to live or die. She should let him decide alone. 10 years of keeping her distance. 10 years of shooting first at any rider who came too close to her land. 10 years of building walls higher than the Montana peaks that ringed her valley. But something about his stillness made her hesitate. Maybe it was how his hands lay open against the wood, empty, no threat in them. Or maybe it was the way he'd fallen. Not like a man who'd been riding hard toward trouble, more like trouble had been riding hard toward him. The wind howled through the gap where she held the door. Snow swirled into her front room, melting on floors she'd scrubbed clean that morning. Her cattle were secure in the barn. Her fences were strong. Her water was pure. Everything the way it should be. Everything the way she'd built it after Samuel died. The stranger's breathing hitched, stopped, started again. Maya lowered her rifle. She grabbed his shoulders and pulled, dead weight, heavier than she'd expected. Her hands burned where they touched the wet fabric of his coat. When was the last time she'd touched another person, really touched them? Not since the day they'd brought Samuel home across his horse. The stranger's head lolled as she dragged him inside. She kicked the door shut with her boot. Snow melted in puddles around them both. His face was pale beneath 3 days of stubble, maybe 35, maybe older. Hard to tell with men who lived rough. A bullet had carved a line across his ribs, not deep enough to kill but deep enough to matter. His shirt was torn where he'd tried to bandage himself with strips of cloth. The kind of patchwork a man did when he couldn't stop moving long enough to do it right. Maya fetched her medical kit from the kitchen. Samuel had taught her field medicine during his Buffalo Soldier days. How to clean wounds, how to stop bleeding, how to keep men alive when dying seemed easier. She cut away the stranger's shirt with her shears. His skin was cold beneath her fingers, too cold. She pressed clean cloth against the wound and his eyes snapped open. Brown eyes, dark as creek water in shadow. They fixed on her face with the sharp focus of a man checking for enemies. She didn't move her hands away. "You're safe," she said. The first words she'd spoken aloud in 3 days. His lips moved but no sound came. She reached for the water pitcher and helped him drink. A few drops, then more. His eyes never left her face. "What's your name?" she asked. "Arthur." His voice was rough as bark. "Arthur Callahan. Maya Freeman. This is my ranch." He tried to sit up. She pressed him back down with one hand against his shoulder. Strange how natural it felt. How her body remembered the weight and warmth of another person. "Easy," she said. "You're not going anywhere in this storm." Arthur's eyes moved around her front room, taking inventory, the reinforced door, the rifle rack, the windows set high and narrow, a woman's house built for war. "You live alone?" he asked. "I live careful." Thunder rolled across the valley again, longer this time, the kind of storm that settled in for days. Maya had provisions, enough firewood, enough ammunition if things went that direction, but not enough distance between herself and this stranger. Arthur's breathing evened out as the whiskey she'd put in his water took hold. His eyes grew heavy, but before they closed completely, he spoke again. "I'm sorry," he said, "about bringing trouble to your door." Maya's hands stilled on the bandage. What kind of trouble? But Arthur had already slipped into the gray space between consciousness and sleep. His lips moved without sound. Words that sounded like orders, like apologies, like the kind of things men said when the past wouldn't let them rest. Maya finished wrapping his wound. Her hands remembered the work, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't been this close to a man since Samuel. Hadn't felt the heat of another person's skin or heard breathing that wasn't her own. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled her windows and moaned through the gaps in her walls. But inside, the house felt different, full of another person's presence, full of questions she wasn't ready to ask. She pulled a blanket over Arthur's chest and stepped back. Her rifle leaned against the wall where she could reach it. Her medical kit sat open on the floor beside him, everything practical, everything controlled, but her hands were shaking. Arthur woke to silence thicker than snow. The storm had passed, but the quiet felt wrong, too complete. Maya stood at her kitchen window, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Her horses were screaming. She set down the cup and reached for her rifle. Arthur pushed himself upright, wincing as the bandage pulled against his ribs. "Stay inside," Maya said. She was already moving toward the door. Arthur watched through the window as she crossed the yard. Her horses circled their corral in wild-eyed panic, foam on their necks, hooves churning mud and snow. Something had spooked them bad. Arthur found his shirt hanging by the fire, mostly dry. He pulled it on and followed Maya outside. The cold bit through the cotton, but he kept moving. Maya stood at the corral fence, rifle ready. Her horses pressed against the far side, trembling. Arthur approached slowly. The animals were focused on something beyond the barn, something in the tree line. "Mountain cat?" Maya asked. Arthur studied the horses. Their ears were forward, not back, alert, not defensive. "No, they smell something else." He moved to the fence and made a low sound in his throat, not quite a whistle, not quite a song. The horses turned toward him. Their ears flicked forward. Maya watched him speak to her animals in a language she didn't recognize. Lakota words, soft and rhythmic. The horses began to calm. Their breathing slowed. They stopped circling. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "My mother's people." Maya's grip tightened on her rifle. She'd seen what cavalry soldiers did to Lakota villages, what they did to anyone who got in their way. But Arthur wasn't looking at her. He was studying the ground beyond the corral. Boot prints in the mud, fresh ones, leading from the tree line to her barn and back again. "Someone was here," he said, "while we slept." Maya felt ice form in her stomach. 10 years of isolation, 10 years of safety. And now strangers were walking her land in the dark. "How many?" she asked. "2 men, maybe 3. Arthur knelt beside the clearest print. Military boots, but old ones. The kind soldiers wear after they leave the army. Maya thought about the letters, 3 of them over the past 6 months, all saying the same thing: sell the ranch, move on, find somewhere else to be a widow. She'd burned each one in her kitchen fire. They were watching the house, Arthur said. He followed the tracks to the barn wall, looking for something or someone. Maya felt the weight of his words. Arthur hadn't brought trouble to her door. Trouble had already been here, waiting. The horses had settled, but they stayed alert. Arthur moved along the fence line, reading sign. Maya followed. She knew her land better than her own heartbeat, every rock and tree and gully. But Arthur saw things she missed. "There," he said, pointing to broken branches at the tree line. "They had a camp, cold camp, no fire, professional, patient. The kind of men who knew how to wait." Maya led Arthur back to the house. She poured coffee and set the cup in front of him. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. "Why would anyone watch my ranch?" she asked. Arthur sipped the coffee, strong and bitter, the kind that kept men awake through long nights. "What do you have that someone might want?" Maya gestured at the simple room around them. It's just a ranch." But Arthur was looking past the furniture, at the reinforced door frames, the gun rack, the windows placed for defense rather than light. "You built this place like a fort," he said. "I built it to last." Arthur nodded. He understood about building things to last, about preparing for wars that might never come. "The letters," Maya said. "Someone's been wanting me to sell." "What letters?" Maya fetched them from her desk drawer. 3 envelopes, expensive paper, the kind rich men used for important business. Arthur read them carefully. His face grew darker with each page. "Freeman Ranch represents significant water rights," he read aloud, "in a region where such resources will become increasingly valuable." "Water rights," Maya repeated. Arthur looked out her window at the creek that ran through her property. Clear water. year-round flow, in a territory where most streams ran dry by August. Your land isn't valuable for cattle, he said. It's valuable for water. Maya felt pieces clicking together. Samuel's death, the threatening letters, now watchers in the night. Someone wants me gone, she said. Someone wanted your husband gone too. The words hung between them. Maya had spent 10 years believing Samuel died for being too successful, too proud, too visible, but maybe he died for water. Arthur stood and moved to the window. He was studying the sight lines from her house to the tree line, calculating distances and angles. You know something about this, Maya said, about who's watching. Arthur was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old guilt. I might know who sent them. Maya waited. Outside, her horses had returned to grazing, peaceful, but their ears still flicked toward the trees. There's a man named Morrison, Arthur said. Captain Morrison. He runs operations for people with money, people who want things that don't belong to them. Operations. Convincing folks to sell, to move on, to find other places to live. Maya understood. The kind of convincing that left widows and empty houses. And you worked for him. I did. Arthur's reflection stared back from the window glass. Until I didn't. Maya set down her coffee cup. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Are you the reason they're here? Part of it. Arthur turned to face her. But only part. They want your land, Maya, with or without me. Snow began falling again. Light flakes that caught the morning sun, beautiful and cold. Maya watched Arthur's face. The guilt there, the determination underneath it. How long have they been watching? She asked. Months, maybe longer. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. 10 years of thinking she was safe. 10 years of believing isolation meant security. All of it had been an illusion. What do they want you to do? She asked. Arthur met her eyes. Leave, before they come calling. Maya walked to her gun rack. She lifted down a Winchester and checked the action. Smooth and clean. Then I guess they'll be disappointed. Arthur watched her load cartridges into the magazine. Her movements were practiced, efficient. This isn't your fight, he said. Maya worked the lever action. The sound echoed through her kitchen. It's been my fight for 10 years. I just didn't know it yet. Outside, snow continued to fall, but something had changed in the quality of the silence. It no longer felt empty. It felt like the quiet before thunder. The storm had damaged more than Maya realized. Her fence line was down in 3 places. Posts snapped clean through. Wire tangled around broken timber like metal thorns. Arthur worked beside her in the cold morning air. His movements were precise, military, each repair built to last longer than the original. Maya found herself watching his hands, the way he twisted wire, how he braced posts against the frozen ground. Samuel had been gentle with tools. Arthur handled them with controlled violence. You weren't regular cavalry, she said. Arthur drove a post deeper into the earth. No, special units, the kind they don't talk about. Arthur's hammer found its rhythm again. Strike, strike, strike. Each blow driving truth deeper underground. Maya knew about units that didn't exist. Samuel had mentioned them during his darker moments. Soldiers who handled problems too sensitive for official reports. How many villages? She asked. Arthur's hammer stopped mid-swing. Too many. The honesty cut through the morning cold. Maya had expected denials, excuses. Instead, she got the weight of genuine remorse. Arthur resumed hammering, but something had changed in his posture. Less rigid, more human. My mother's people were at Sand Creek, he said, before I was born, but she remembered. Maya understood. Remembered meant scars, meant stories passed down in whispers. Yet you still wore the uniform. I was young. Thought I could change things from the inside. Arthur set down his hammer. Took me too long to learn better. They worked in silence after that. Arthur's story hung between them, heavy as the gray sky above. By noon, they'd repaired 2 sections. Maya's cattle grazed peacefully behind new wire. Arthur had used knots she'd never seen before, complex loops that would hold under pressure. Where did you learn those? She asked. Engineers taught us how to build things that mattered, how to destroy them when they didn't. Maya felt ice form in her chest. Is that what you did to villages, destroyed things that mattered? Arthur's hands stilled on the wire. Yes. No excuses, no explanations, just truth laid bare. Maya walked to the creek that ran through her property. Clear water over smooth stones. The sound had comforted her for 10 years. Now it seemed fragile, something that could be diverted or dammed or poisoned. Arthur followed her to the water's edge. Morrison came to our unit 2 years ago, he said. Had contracts for private work, better pay than army wages. Told us we'd be protecting honest folks from troublemakers. Maya watched water flow over rocks worn smooth by time. But you weren't. First job was a Mexican family near Santa Fe, small ranch, good water. Morrison said they were harboring bandits. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She knew how this story ended. We found no bandits. Just a man and his wife trying to raise cattle. Morrison burned them out anyway. Said the contract was for the land, not justice. Arthur knelt by the creek and cupped water in his palms. It ran between his fingers like liquid light. I should have left then, should have walked away. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Maya knelt beside him, close enough to feel heat from his body, close enough to see the pain carved into his face. What changed your mind? Arthur's hands were still in the water. A ranch outside Denver, black family, freedman and his wife. They'd built something good from nothing. Maya's breath caught. Like Samuel and me. Like Samuel and you. Arthur lifted his hands from the creek. Morrison had the same papers, same legal language, but this time I recognized the names on the contracts. What names? Arthur met her eyes. The same ones on your threatening letters. The world shifted underneath Maya. She'd suspected her troubles connected to Arthur's arrival, but this was deeper, older, a web that stretched back years. Morrison's people killed Samuel, she said. Probably the methods match. Maya stood and walked back toward her fence line. Her legs felt unsteady. 10 years of believing Samuel died for being too successful, too visible, but he died because someone wanted water. Arthur followed her. The Denver family fought back, had help from neighbors, turned ugly fast. Maya could imagine. She'd heard stories. Good families destroyed by legal papers and night riders. Morrison's unit took casualties, Arthur continued. Real ones, men who wouldn't be going home to their families. Maya understood. Arthur had seen enough blood, finally found his line in the sand. So you deserted. I walked away from my unit during a night patrol, left my uniform and weapons. Morrison's been hunting me ever since. Maya reached her broken fence. Arthur had repaired it perfectly, stronger than before. But now she saw it differently. Not just a barrier to keep cattle in, a wall to keep wolves out. How long have they been watching my ranch? She asked. Months, maybe longer. Morrison likes to study his targets, learn their habits, find their weaknesses. Maya felt exposed, naked under the gray sky, every morning routine, every evening chore, all of it catalogued by hostile eyes. What happens when he makes his move? Arthur tested the repaired wire. Tight as piano strings. He'll come with papers first, legal documents that say you need to sell, give you time to consider the wisdom of cooperation. And if I refuse? Arthur's hands gripped the wire until his knuckles went white. Accidents happen, fires start, good people disappear. Maya walked to her house and looked up at the windows. She'd built this place to last, but Arthur was right. It looked more like a fort than a home. Maybe it always had been. There's something else, she said. Arthur waited. Maya led him to the root cellar behind her kitchen. Stone walls, heavy wooden door. She lifted the bar and pulled it open. Inside, shelves lined the walls. But instead of preserves and grain, Maya had stored weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, enough provisions for a siege. Arthur stepped into the underground room. His eyes moved over her preparations with professional interest. How long have you been getting ready? He asked. Since the day they buried Samuel. Arthur picked up a box of rifle cartridges, military grade, the expensive kind. You weren't planning to go quietly. I wasn't planning to go at all. Arthur set down the ammunition and turned to face her. Something had shifted in his expression, respect mixing with understanding. "They don't know about this," he said. "They don't know about a lot of things." Maya showed him the rest of her preparations, maps of the surrounding territory, detailed notes about neighboring ranchers, lists of men who might stand with her if trouble came calling. Arthur studied her work with growing amazement. "You've been preparing for war." "I've been preparing for Morrison." Arthur looked up from her papers. "You knew his name." Maya pulled out a folder from the bottom shelf. Inside were newspaper clippings, reports about mysterious fires, unexplained accidents, families who'd sold their land and disappeared, all connected by one thread, a pattern Arthur recognized. "I've been tracking him for 3 years," Maya said, "ever since I realized Samuel's death wasn't random." Arthur felt the pieces clicking together. Maya wasn't just a victim waiting to be saved. She was a hunter who'd been stalking her prey. "What were you planning to do?" he asked. Maya's smile was cold as Winter Creek water. "Whatever it took." Outside, wind picked up through the broken land. It carried the scent of snow and distant smoke. But down in the root cellar, surrounded by weapons and plans, the air felt warm with possibility. Maya had spent 10 years building her fortress. Now she had someone to share it with. Arthur had spent 2 years running from his past. Now he had something worth standing still for. Neither spoke the words aloud, but both understood. The war was coming whether they wanted it or not. The only question was whether they'd face it together. They came with the sunrise. 7 riders moving across the valley floor in perfect formation. Military discipline wrapped in civilian clothes. Maya watched from her kitchen window. Arthur stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. "Morrison," he said. The lead rider was tall in his saddle, gray hair beneath a black hat. He carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who expected the world to snap to attention. Behind him rode 6 others, all cut from the same cloth, hard faces and harder eyes, men who'd learned violence as a trade and practiced it as an art. "They're flying a white flag," Maya said, a strip of cloth tied to Morrison's rifle. "The universal signal for parley, for negotiation." Arthur's laugh held no humor. "Morrison's idea of negotiation is choosing how you want to die." Maya stepped away from the window. Her Winchester leaned against the wall where she'd left it, loaded and ready. "What does he want?" "To see if you'll come quietly. If not, he'll know what he's dealing with." Maya understood. This wasn't really a negotiation. It was reconnaissance. Morrison wanted to test her resolve before committing to war. The riders stopped 50 yards from her front porch, close enough to talk, far enough to retreat if shooting started. Morrison dismounted and walked forward alone. His boots made no sound on the frozen ground. A man who'd learned to move quietly through hostile territory. He was older than Maya had expected, maybe 60, but his shoulders were straight and his hands steady. Age hadn't softened him. "Mrs. Freeman," he called out, "I'd like a word." Maya opened her front door but stayed in the frame, rifle visible but not raised, a careful balance between courtesy and threat. "Captain Morrison," she said. Morrison's eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised that she knew his name, or former name. Men who did his kind of work rarely stayed in the army long. "May I approach?" Maya nodded. Morrison walked closer. His eyes moved over her fortified house with professional interest, taking note of the reinforced door, the strategically placed windows, the sight lines and cover positions. "You've built quite a stronghold here," he said. "I've built a home," Morrison smiled. The expression never reached his eyes. "Of course, a lovely home in a very valuable location." Behind Morrison, his men waited motionless in their saddles, patient as vultures. Maya counted weapons. 6 rifles, at least 12 handguns, enough firepower to level her ranch twice over. "I represent certain business interests," Morrison continued. "Parties who recognize the strategic importance of your water rights." "My water isn't for sale." "Everything is for sale, Mrs. Freeman. It's simply a matter of finding the right price." Morrison reached into his coat. Maya's grip tightened on her rifle, but he only produced a folded paper, legal documents with official seals. "A generous offer," he said. "Enough money to start fresh anywhere you choose, somewhere more suitable for a woman in your circumstances." Maya didn't take the papers. What circumstances would those be? Alone, isolated, vulnerable. Morrison's voice carried false sympathy. "This is hard country, Mrs. Freeman, dangerous for someone without proper protection." Maya felt Arthur tense behind her. Morrison knew exactly what he was saying, knew how it would land. "I manage just fine on my own, for now, but accidents happen, storms destroy buildings, fires spread quickly in dry seasons." Morrison folded the papers and tucked them away. Much safer to accept reasonable compensation while it's still available. The threat hung in the cold air between them. Polite words wrapped around ugly intentions. "How long do I have to consider your generous offer?" Maya asked. 48 hours should be sufficient. Time to pack what matters, arrange transportation." Morrison's smile turned colder. "Time to say goodbye to any friends who might be visiting." His eyes moved past Maya to the shadows where Arthur stood. Recognition flickered across Morrison's face. Not surprise, confirmation. "Mr. Callahan," Morrison said, "how nice to see you again." Arthur stepped into the doorway beside Maya. His presence changed the entire dynamic. No longer a negotiation between predator and prey. Now it was a confrontation between former allies. "Captain," Arthur said, "I was disappointed when you left us so suddenly, without proper notice. I gave you all the notice you deserved." Morrison's hand moved closer to his sidearm, a casual adjustment that fooled no one. "Desertion is a serious offense, Mr. Callahan, even from unofficial units. It carries severe penalties." Arthur moved his own hand to his gun, "only if someone cares enough to enforce them." Maya watched the tension build between the two men, old grievances rising to the surface. But this wasn't about their past. It was about her future. 48 hours, she said. Morrison's attention snapped back to her. "I'm sorry, 48 hours, then you'll have my answer." Morrison studied her face, looking for weakness, for doubt. He found neither. "Very well. 48 hours." Morrison touched the brim of his hat. "I do hope you'll make the wise choice, Mrs. Freeman, for everyone's sake." He turned and walked back to his horse. His men remained motionless until he mounted. Then they moved as one, wheeling their horses and riding back across the valley. Maya watched them go, 7 dark shapes against the pale morning sky. They rode without haste, confident in their power, certain of their eventual victory. Arthur closed the door and barred it. 48 hours, he said. 48 hours to what? Arthur moved to the window and watched Morrison's riders disappear into the distance. "To decide if we run or make our stand here." Maya set down her rifle and walked to her kitchen. She poured coffee into 2 cups. Her hands were perfectly steady. "I'm not running," she said. Arthur accepted the coffee but didn't drink. "Maya, you don't understand what we're up against. Morrison has resources, men, weapons. He can bring enough firepower to level this place." Maya sipped her coffee, strong and bitter, the taste of decisions made in darkness. "He can try." Arthur set down his cup and moved closer, close enough to see the determination in her eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. "This isn't just about you anymore. Morrison wants me dead. If I stay, I'm putting you in more danger." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "If you leave, you're taking away my best chance of survival." The words hung between them, truth laid bare. They needed each other now, not just for companionship or comfort, for the war that was coming. Arthur reached out and touched Maya's hand. The first truly intimate gesture either had allowed in years. Her skin was warm beneath his fingers, calloused from work but soft in the spaces between. "Are you sure?" he asked. Maya turned her hand palm up. Let their fingers interlock. 10 years of avoiding human contact. 10 years of walls and distance and careful isolation. All of it ending with the simple act of holding hands in her kitchen while enemies gathered beyond her borders. "I'm sure," she said. Outside, wind began to pick up. It rattled her windows and moaned through the gaps in her walls. But inside, something had shifted, changed in ways that couldn't be undone. Maya had chosen to trust completely. Arthur had chosen to stand and fight. Neither knew if they'd survive what was coming. Both knew they'd face it together. The war for Freeman Ranch was about to begin. The attack came at dawn on the second day. Not with guns or fire, but with smoke rising from the Hendricks place 3 miles east. Maya watched the black column climb into the gray sky. Too much smoke for a cooking fire, too early for burning brush. Arthur studied the distant flames through her field glasses. His face was stone, but his hands trembled slightly. "House fire," he said. Maya knew the Hendricks family. Good people. 3 children, a baby on the way. They'd helped her bring in hay last autumn when Samuel's old equipment finally broke down. "Accident?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Arthur lowered the glasses. "Morrison doesn't believe in accidents." By midday the smoke had died to a thin gray line. No riders came from that direction. No survivors seeking help. The silence was worse than screaming. Arthur and Maya spent the afternoon preparing. They moved ammunition to strategic locations throughout the house, filled water barrels, checked sight lines from every window. Maya worked with mechanical precision, each task completed without wasted motion. But Arthur noticed how she paused whenever her eyes turned toward the eastern horizon, toward the place where the Hendricks family had lived. "You can't save everyone," he said. Maya didn't look at him. "I couldn't save anyone." That evening they saw more smoke, this time from the Johnson ranch to the south, then another column from the Miller homestead near the creek. Morrison was clearing the valley, removing witnesses, making sure no one would interfere when he finally came for Freeman Ranch. Maya and Arthur ate dinner in silence, cold beans and hardtack, food that wouldn't require cooking when the shooting started. Maya's hands were steady as she cleaned their plates, but she hadn't touched her meal. Arthur found her later standing in her root cellar. She was staring at the weapons and supplies she'd gathered over 3 years. Preparation for a war that was finally here. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. Maya picked up a box of rifle cartridges, turned it over in her hands. "Thinking about Samuel." Arthur waited. He wanted to fight back. After the first threats, after they burned out the Martinez family, Maya set down the ammunition. "I told him to be careful, to keep his head down, to not give them an excuse." Arthur understood. The weight of advice that led to tragedy, the burden of words that couldn't be taken back. "Samuel didn't listen," Maya continued. "Kept pushing, kept digging, kept trying to prove they were stealing water rights from half the county. He was right. He was dead." Maya's voice cracked slightly. "Right doesn't matter when you're buried 6 feet under." Arthur moved closer, close enough to feel the grief radiating from her skin, close enough to offer comfort if she'd accept it. "This time is different," he said. "How?" Arthur gestured at the weapons surrounding them, the careful preparations, the fortress she'd built from determination and loss. "This time you're ready." Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ready for what?" "To die fighting instead of running, to burn down with my house instead of walking away." Arthur reached out and touched her shoulder. She didn't pull away. "Ready to choose your own ending." That night they took turns on watch. Maya had the first shift. She sat by her kitchen window with her rifle across her knees, watching shadows move across the valley floor. Arthur found her there when he woke for his turn. She was still staring into the darkness, still holding her weapon, but tears tracked silver lines down her cheeks. "Maya," she didn't turn around. "I can see their fires." Arthur looked out the window. Distant orange glows marked where Morrison's men had made camp. 3 separate locations, north, south, and east. They had her surrounded. "How many?" Maya asked. Arthur counted the fires. "Maybe 15 men, maybe 20. Maya nodded. She'd expected worse, or maybe this was worse than she'd hoped. "We could still leave," Arthur said. "Slip out through the western pass, be in Colorado by morning." Maya stood and handed him her rifle. "Your watch." She walked to her bedroom without answering. Arthur heard her moving around, opening drawers, folding clothes, the sounds of a woman putting her affairs in order. but she wasn't packing to leave. When Arthur's shift ended, he found Maya in her kitchen making coffee. She'd changed into her best dress. Black wool with silver buttons, the dress she'd worn to Samuel's funeral. "Special occasion?" Arthur asked. Maya poured coffee into 2 cups. Her hands were perfectly steady now. The trembling was gone. The tears had dried. "If I'm going to die today, I want to look proper." Arthur accepted his cup but didn't drink. "You're not going to die today." Maya met his eyes. Something had changed during the night. The uncertainty was gone. The fear had crystallized into resolve. "Maybe not, but if I do, Morrison's going to remember my name." Outside, the eastern sky began to lighten. Gray dawn breaking over the valley. Arthur could hear horses moving in the distance. Men calling to each other in low voices. Morrison was positioning his forces, getting ready for the final assault. Maya walked to her gun rack and selected her Winchester. She worked the action once. The sound was sharp and clean in the quiet house. "Whatever happens," she said, "don't let them take me alive." Arthur felt ice form in his chest. "Maya, promise me." Arthur understood what she was asking, the weight of it. Samuel had been tortured before they killed him. Maya had seen what Morrison's men did to people who crossed them. "Promise me," she said again. Arthur picked up his own rifle, checked the load. "It won't come to that. But if it does." Arthur met her eyes, saw the fear there, and underneath it the iron determination that had kept her alive for 10 years. "If it does," he said. Maya nodded. The matter settled. She walked to her front window and looked out at the valley she'd called home. Morrison's men were moving. Black shapes against the pale grass, coming from 3 directions at once. A classic pincer movement designed to overwhelm and destroy. "How long?" Maya asked. Arthur studied their approach, professional soldiers moving with practiced efficiency. They'd reach effective rifle range in minutes. "Not long." Maya checked her ammunition one final time, 30 rounds in her belt. Another 60 in the box beside her position. Enough for a good fight. Maybe enough for victory. Probably enough to make Morrison remember her name. She took her position by the front window. Arthur moved to the back of the house. They discussed the plan during the night. Crossfire zones, fields of fire, how to make every shot count. Outside, the sun broke the horizon. Golden light spilled across the valley. It touched Maya's face through the window glass, made her skin glow. Arthur memorized the image. Maya Freeman in her funeral dress, beautiful and terrible and absolutely unbreakable. The war for Freeman Ranch was about to begin, and Morrison was going to learn what happened when you threatened a woman who had nothing left to lose. The first shot never came. Arthur waited by his window, finger on the trigger. Maya held her position at the front of the house. Both watched Morrison's men advance across the valley floor. Then the riders stopped, just beyond rifle range. They dismounted and formed a loose line, waiting. Morrison stepped forward alone. He carried no weapon. His hands hung empty at his sides. "Mrs. Freeman," he called out, "I'd like to propose an alternative." Maya's grip tightened on her Winchester. "What alternative?" "Single combat, your champion against mine. Winner takes everything." Arthur felt ice form in his stomach. This wasn't mercy. It was Morrison's cruelty refined to its purest form. "What are you thinking?" Maya whispered. Arthur studied Morrison's face, the cold calculation there, the certainty of victory. He's thinking he can't lose. Either I die or you watch me die. But Maya was already moving toward the door. Arthur caught her arm. "Don't. It's the only way to end this without more burning, without more families destroyed." Arthur saw the truth in her eyes. Maya wasn't just fighting for her ranch anymore. She was fighting for every homestead Morrison had torched, every family he'd scattered to the wind. Maya opened her door and stepped onto the porch. "I accept," Morrison smiled. "Excellent. Sergeant Pike will represent my interests." A man stepped forward from Morrison's line, tall and broad. Scars crisscrossed his face and hands. Arthur recognized him immediately. Pike had been Morrison's executioner, the man who handled problems too messy for official reports. "And your champion, Mrs. Freeman." Maya looked back at Arthur. everything unspoken passing between them. 10 years of isolation ending in this moment. Love found and potentially lost in the space of a heartbeat. "Arthur Callahan," she said. Arthur stepped onto the porch beside her. Pike's smile widened when he saw him. "Callahan. Been looking forward to this." Arthur had fought Pike before, during training exercises. Practice bouts that left both men bloody. Pike was stronger, more vicious, but Arthur was faster. It might be enough. Morrison gestured to the open ground between the house and his men. "Gentlemen, if you please." Arthur started forward. Maya caught his hand. "Come back to me," she said. Arthur squeezed her fingers. "Plan 2. The two men met in the center of the field. Morrison called out the terms. No weapons. Fight until one man couldn't continue. The winner's side took everything. Pike cracked his knuckles. "Going to enjoy this, deserter." Arthur said nothing. Words were wasted energy now. Pike charged first. Raw power and brutal efficiency. His fist caught Arthur in the ribs. Air exploded from Arthur's lungs. He staggered backward. But Arthur had expected the attack, had planned for it. He let Pike's momentum carry him forward, then drove his elbow up into Pike's jaw. Pike's head snapped back. Blood sprayed from his mouth. But he didn't fall. They circled each other in the dirt, both men breathing hard, both looking for advantage. Pike feinted left and came in low. Arthur twisted away, but not far enough. Pike's shoulder caught him in the stomach. They went down together, rolling in the dust, trading blows. Arthur's military training against Pike's street brutality. Arthur managed to get on top. He drove his fist down toward Pike's face. Pike caught his wrist, twisted. Arthur's shoulder popped. Pain shot down his arm. Pike threw Arthur aside and climbed to his feet. Arthur rolled away and stood. His left arm hung useless. Pike grinned through bloody teeth. "Getting tired, Callahan?" Arthur shifted his stance, protecting his injured side. Pike came forward again, confident now, certain of victory, but Arthur had learned patience from his mother's people. How to wait, how to watch, how to find the moment when an enemy's strength became weakness. Pike threw a wild haymaker. Arthur ducked under it and came up inside Pike's guard. His right fist drove into Pike's throat. Once, twice, 3 times, Pike staggered backward, gasping, clawing at his neck. Arthur didn't give him time to recover. He swept Pike's legs. The big man went down hard. Arthur followed him to the ground. It ended quickly after that. Pike tried to get up once, fell back, tried again, stayed down. Arthur stood over him, breathing hard. Blood running from his nose. His shoulder screamed with each movement, but he was standing. Pike wasn't. Morrison's face was stone. "It seems you have a new champion, Mrs. Freeman." Arthur walked back toward the house, each step an effort. Maya met him halfway. Her hands were gentle as she checked his injuries. "It's over," she said. Arthur looked past her at Morrison. The captain was already mounting his horse. His men fell in behind him. They rode away without looking back. But Arthur knew Morrison, knew his pride, his cruelty. "For now," Arthur said. 3 days later, Pike arrived alone. He rode slowly up to Maya's house. No weapons visible, his hands raised in surrender. Maya and Arthur watched from the porch. Arthur's arm was in a sling, but his gun hand was free. Pike dismounted 20 feet away. "Mrs. Freeman, Mr. Callahan." "Pike," Arthur said, "came to apologize and to bring information." Pike reached into his coat. Arthur's hand moved to his gun, but Pike only produced a stack of papers. Morrison's orders, names, locations. Everything you'd need to stop him permanently. Arthur studied Pike's face, looking for deception, finding only exhaustion. "Why?" Pike's smile was bitter. "Watched Morrison burn out 3 families this week, kids included. Got tired of being the monster in other people's nightmares." Maya accepted the papers. Legal documents, military dispatches, enough evidence to destroy Morrison and his organization. "Where's Morrison now?" Arthur asked. "Dead. Tried to court-martial me for losing to you. I disagreed with his assessment." Arthur felt no satisfaction, only the hollow completion of a cycle that had claimed too many lives. Pike mounted his horse. "You two take care of each other." He rode away into the setting sun. Arthur and Maya never saw him again. 6 months later, Freeman Ranch had grown. Word spread about the black widow who'd stood against corruption, about the deserter who'd found redemption in love. They came slowly at first. A former slave fleeing Arkansas, a Lakota family displaced by broken treaties, an army deserter seeking absolution. Maya and Arthur welcomed them all, built cabins, shared resources, created something larger than a ranch, a community, a family. Maya stood on her porch in the evening light. Arthur worked in their expanded garden. Children played by the creek where clear water ran over smooth stones. She'd spent 10 years building walls. Now she was building bridges. Arthur looked up from his work, caught her watching, smiled the smile that made her heart remember how to hope. 10 years she'd thought protecting her heart meant keeping it closed. Now she understood the truth. Hearts were meant to grow, to expand, to make room for all the love the world could offer. Maya walked down to join Arthur in their garden. Their hands found each other automatically, calloused fingers intertwining. Two broken people who discovered that healing came not from isolation, but from choosing to trust again. The sun set over Freeman Ranch, over the valley where good people had made their stand, where love had triumphed over fear, where a lonely widow had touched a man's skin and remembered what it meant to be alive. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.